In this lesson, we're just going to practice factoring a couple different situations all combined together. So the first problem is we're going to have negative 4x cubed plus 24x squared minus 36x. And we're going to try and factor it completely. So the very first thing I want to do is my leading coefficient, the negative 4, I want to make it a positive. I want to make the x to the third or whatever the highest power ends up being a positive. So when I do factor out, I'm always going to factor out at least a negative out of something like that. And if there's also a greatest common factor, I want to try and do that as well. So I can take a negative 4 out of every single piece. So to do that, and not only that, I'm going to take a negative 4 and they all have an x. So I'm going to take a negative 4x out of every single term. So dividing that out of this makes it a positive x squared. It's going to subtract, it's going to change the sign on this and make it a negative 6x, and it's going to change the sign on that and make it a positive 9. All right, and so this then multiplies to 9, adds to negative 6. I can do a shortcut on that. That ends up being x minus 3 and x minus 3, negative 4x. And if you'd like, you could write it like that, since we have two factors that are exactly the same. All right, let's practice another. b to the fourth minus 81. So here I have what is known as a difference of squares. I recognize that I have a perfect square with a minus sign. So I'm going to factor this away. So if I'm going to break this apart, I'm going to break this apart into b squared plus 9 and b squared minus 9. And just because I break it apart the one time doesn't mean that it's done. I still want to look to see if I have a difference of squares. And on this one I have a difference of perfect squares. So this can factor further. b plus 3, b minus 3, and then this one is, there is no sum of perfect squares, so that is not factorable. So I will just bring it down and make it part of the solution. All right, so those are the factors that we break b to the fourth minus 81 up into. All right, so if we have 18 x to the third minus 60x squared plus 50x. I'm going to try and factor out the greatest common factor. I think only a 2 is what I can take out, but I can also take an x out of every single piece, so let's see where that goes. That'll get us a 9x squared minus 30x plus 25. Now I can't do the shortcut that I did up here, where I don't have a number in front of the x squared, so it's just what multiplies the 9 that adds to negative 6. Instead, I have a number, so I could potentially have to do the AC method, or another version of that. But I do have a perfect square and I have another perfect square. So there is potential that it could factor into this. All right. If that works, it's because you have an a squared plus 2ab, actually that would be a minus. It's a special case. So if you have that, it factors into a minus b squared, which is kind of what I'm looking at. And I see the perfect square and the perfect square, but I got to check on the middle part. So I need to know if those two pieces multiply together, which that's my a and that's my b. So that makes a negative 15x. So that's my a times b, but do I have two of them? So if you multiply it by 2, that gets you a negative 30x, which matches our middle piece. So that is exactly how it factors. Great. And then I will bring the 2x down with it. All right, and that's just a special case. It's not the only way to do it, but if you recognize it, it makes it a little bit faster. All right, one more. So if we have 8x to the third plus 28x squared minus 16x, I'm going to start with what can I factor out? What's my greatest common factor? They all have a factor of 4x that I can divide out. So that will give me a 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. All right. Now I have another where I can't just say what multiplies to the negative 4 that adds to the 7. The 2 stops that. I don't have perfect squares on the end, so I don't have the potential for a special case. So I'm going to have to just do the AC method to factor that. So I have 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. A times c is negative 8. And I want numbers that multiply to negative 8 that are going to add to a 7. So that'd be a negative 1 and an 8. So that is how I break the negative or the positive 7 apart. So 2x squared minus x plus 8x minus 4. And then we factor by grouping. I can take an x out of that. So that is a 2x minus 1. I can, and I'm going to want another 2x minus 1 if this is to work. Can I divide out of that to make this? So I can divide a 4 out of those two to make a 2x minus 1. So what do these have in common? They both have a 2x minus 1 in common. So I can factor that out of both. The x would be left and the plus 4 would be left. And those are the factors of that quadratic. So I have 4x, 2x minus 1, and x plus 4. And those are the factors of my original 8x to the third problem. All right, and that was just a little bit of practicing factoring with a couple different scenarios happening at the same time.